What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another edition of Superstar Scores here from the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I am Tony Mango, your host as always, joined as always by Robert E. Felice.
Hello.
And Callum Wiggins.
Do we have your attention now?
Tell me when we're telling lies with these scores. We are going to be doing something that is a regular on this podcast recently, talking about CM Punk. He's had a lot of stuff revolving around him in recent months, and most recently, of course, he was released from his contract in AEW. And when people get fired, or if they retire, or if they pass away, or if they are particularly really big in the scene and we haven't done a Superstar Scores for them yet, it's really a good time to look back on their career and kind of assess the damage, so to speak. And Punk is somebody that we could have done a while ago, back before he made his return to wrestling. And I'm sure his score would have been positive more in some ways and more negative in some other ways if we had done this at different eras. But nevertheless, we're doing it now, September 6th. And with the firing from AEW fresh in our minds, who knows if the scores get adjusted in the future with something pro or con. But what we are doing is the normal setup here. If you are not familiar with Superstar Scores and you've not checked out the previous 34 or so editions that we've done, what we do is we rank whoever the particular superstar is that we are talking about on a 0 to 10 scale in 10 different categories. Each one of those categories is broken up where it's a group of two as like an umbrella category type thing. So we will explain how those work as we go along. And we also want to know what your scores are. So while we go ahead and we give our scores, tell us what you ended up giving him in your comments below on YouTube. If you are over there on YouTube, make sure that you click on the like button, double check that you are subscribed to the channel. If you want to toss a little spare change our way, you got the little thanks button. You also have the join button, which will give you access to the subscription service there on the YouTube channel membership side. $1 a month is great. $5 a month, even better. $10 a month, you get access to the Darkcasts. If you want to make sure that we do some kind of particular thing, like you really miss out on the mock drafts, we haven't done that in a while, then you can sponsor that through a Pick Your Poison donation. And obviously, if you're listening to us outside of YouTube, there are the Patreon options that are exactly the same over on there. So if you go to patreon.com/smarkoutmoment, then you can sponsor something like another Superstar Scores. You know, we have got so many different people that are really high up in the like Mount Rushmore type category that we haven't gotten around to doing yet. Like John Cena was an option that we could have done this week, or we haven't done The Rock. We haven't done people on the negative side of things as well. People have asked us before to do Superstar Scores Chris Benoit just to see what we would get for him, or people that were obviously not as controversial, but they just weren't all that great in the ring, like Superstar Scores Mantar, maybe, or something. There are so many different options for different features and everything. And if you can birth something brand new, you can also do that too. I don't really want to see the footage of that, but at the same time, it's always an option to pick your poison in whatever fashion it is. So if you want to help out on that end, that's an option. You've got Redbubble and TeePublic for the merchandise if you want to pick up a t-shirt or something. But just listening to this and, giving us those comments, it's another great way to help out, and it doesn't cost you a dime. So as we go along here, we are going to try to be as objective as possible when it comes to these scores. We always are. Obviously we have our preferences and we have our fandom that can come into factor for things like, just giving a little bit of a boost if we're a big fan of them, where we can kind of be like, I don't really see what's so great about this or something. But I think we're relatively fair when we do these. And then we also debate and we kind of influence each other one way or another. Sometimes we can bump each other's scores up by a considerable margin. Sometimes it's, hey, you forgot about this big thing that's a problem, and I got to dock a couple points. So we do have 0 to 10 on 10 categories. 100 is the best possible score, and we haven't gotten anybody that had been particularly close to that range, although we've had people in that 90 type range And I believe that Undertaker is still our overall highest score for our combined average at like 90 point something or other. 90.67 is currently the Undertaker. So a couple 89 types, a lot of people in that 60s, 70s, 80s range. Obviously some lower scores for the Steve Blackmans and the Buff Bagwells and stuff that are out there. So let's get into it and start talking about the specifics of the categories. The first two that we have are athleticism and psychology. Now, these are lumped together for the in-ring skills, and they're pretty self-explanatory, but obviously, to break it down even more, athleticism are all the attributes that have to deal with them botching or performing a wide variety of moves. Do you like their finisher? Do you think that they are just, tripping over their feet, or are they very capable in the ring like that? Psychology is the storytelling aspect of that. Can they keep a match interesting going for a while and keep you hooked and really want to, see that hot tag in a tag team match? Or can they sell an injury really well? Like, Bret Hart is always one of my top people that I rank as far as psychology in the ring, for instance. Who wants to go first? What'd you give him for athleticism and psychology? Where's Phil going?
I'll go first. I gave him an 8 across the board.
As did I, actually.
He's a very, athletic competitor. I think people get confused. A lot of times with CM Punk, they think he did a lot of, flippy dippy kind of moves. And he's actually just a solid technical wrestler that can throw in a nice springboard when need be. And I think he helped really bridge the gap from the Triple H at Shawn Michaels era to the more, spot-based stuff we see today. And I've always thought he was very solid in the ring. Psychology, I gave him an 8. I could have gone higher, but ultimately I went with an 8. I think he one of the few wrestlers who really understands psychology very well in today's day and age. I think anytime he, cuts a promo or does a match, it was very story focused, and I really enjoyed this aspect of CM Punk, and it was something that I thought he was really helping to bring to AEW.
I went with a 8 and a 9, so an 8 for athleticism and 9 for psychology. I went for an 8 because I think that he mirrors a lot of the other people I've given an 8 for athleticism to, and he had a reasonably diverse in-ring style. But you have the high running knees and springboard clotheslines, and obviously GTS, and he had his the Anaconda by submission, and was able to mix things up as well, especially when he got to AEW and got to be a bit more free in what he would do, as opposed to what he was doing in WWE was pretty much the same thing over and over again. But when he went to AEW and obviously in Ring of Honor, he brought the Pepsi plunge back, and that's a really cool move. So I think he drops down a little bit because he is prone to, I don't say prone to botching, but he does botch occasionally, and I think in the heat of a match, he does tend to slip up a little bit, and I think in a way it makes the match more realistic because he's not just a very choreographed wrestler. He's not the most coordinated wrestler in the world, but he knows what to do. He knows where to be in the right moments. I give him a 9 for psychology because I think whatever he lacks in a little bit of coordination, athletically, he more than makes up for in his ability to tell a story in a match. And beyond the fact of just having a very old school mentality, which helps distinguish him from others that have wrestled recently, he's also very good at transitioning a match based on the crowd reaction. So he'll go in kind of knowing that, he's supposed to be the quote-unquote either babyface or heel, and then he'll hear what the crowd is saying or doing, and then he'll just pivot the match based on that, or he'll pivot the way that he behaves in accordance with that. So I think that's something that not many wrestlers today know how to do or trained how to do, because they are very much taught to be, this is the spot and we're moving on to this spot straight after, and it's very, very formulaic. Whereas I think Punk is a guy that says, oh, let's go out, let's feel what the audience is feeling, and then we'll pivot around that. So I think in that regard, his psychology should go up. Went up a little bit higher for me.
So I went with the double eights for a lot of the same reasons that you guys are saying. Like, Punk is not going around flipping or like Rey Mysterio in his prime type, but at the same time, that's not his style, and not everybody has the same style. He did do some moves that were not as standard as a body slam and a leg drop and whatever, but he was able to pull it off for the most part up until he got all the ring rust. And I haven't been the biggest fan of his in-ring work from AEW as much as a lot of other people have. I think that he's botched a lot more than even some people are willing to give credit towards and ding him for a little bit. But he at least is somebody that I can depend on, that he should be able to get a good match out of almost anybody. So not a 9 or a 10 on me, but an 8 is practically as good as you can get for the most part. There's 8 spots lower than that. So he's off to a pretty good start with this, and I'm gonna continue that a little bit more with the charisma and character side of it on the mic work, which the clarification of that for anybody that's confused about why there are two things for mic work. Charisma is their ability to cut the promo without stuttering and just to be entertaining in that aspect of just flat out speaking the words. And the character side of it is their gimmick and their heel and face dynamics and their projection of who they are or who they're trying to portray as, this pro wrestling character. I gave him a 10 for charisma, and I gave him a 7 for character. And it sounds like that's a big gap between them, but really CM Punk's character is Guy. He doesn't have one of the more outlandish things. Like, I've given 10s to Undertaker and Kane, and I gave a 9 to Bray Wyatt, and I gave a 9 to I gave a 10 to Mick Foley for his characters. And Punk is pretty much just a guy. I do really like some of the character work that he's done with like the Straight Edge Society, but then once that kind of got diminished a little bit, then he was just a guy that complained. So I tossed around the 8 for a little bit, decided on the 7, but for charisma on the mic, he's a great talker. He is one of those guys that just knows what he's doing, doesn't tend to stumble around his words all that much, cuts great promos when he's got the time to do a pipe bomb or to really sink his teeth into something. So you can't get much better when it comes to CM Punk on the mic.
I also gave him a 10 for charisma, for everything that you just said. And really, I think, and not to steal his phrase, but I guess it's appropriate, tell me when I'm telling lies, is he not one of the last wrestlers who can just talk fans to a building? I mean, it obviously didn't go the way we all thought it might, but he said counterfeit bucks, and the internet exploded. You know what I mean? Like, they could have never touched and done an amazing match with that. I think largely stuff he did with Joe was all promo based. The stuff he did with Max, I mean, like, he really was talking fans into the building in AEW. And of course, he was one of the few who could legitimately talk at a time where WWE was really 90% robots created and developmental. So I give him 10. And for character, I gave him an 8. I understand everything you're saying, Tony, but I also think he has created such a force with the CM Punk persona that, like, there's a lot of hero worship around CM Punk because of how he carries himself, because of the arrogant yet helpful yet, pissy character that he portrayed, which might just be him. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But either way, it definitely captivated an audience, and he's got a legion of fans, so I gave him an 8.
10 for charisma. Of course, Punk gets 10 for charisma. He is one of the most charismatic wrestlers of all time. He has a cult following, primarily in Chicago, but pretty much everywhere in the world. You have people that like fall at this man's feet because of the words that he says. Like his pure power is on the microphone, and yeah, he speaks real, and he speaks in a way that isn't robotic or over dramatic or like that hype man approach that people like. I'd say there's nothing wrong with it. Like guys like Hogan or Warrior would do. He is very more methodical in his approach, but just the way that he speaks is very, very captivating. He has kind of a Charles Manson quality to him that I think gives him a little bit more gravitas towards people and helps them influence him. That's why, even with all the shit that's going down, there's going to be people that will say that he never did anything wrong. And that's the kind of character that he is.
So you're saying they drink the Kool-Aid?
Oh, yeah. I'd say so. I give him a 9 for character, because I think that even though in more recent times his character has been who he is, and whether you like it or not, it is very captivating. But I think that it was interesting about his character is that because he is so true to himself, he transitions from heel to babyface, back to heel, back to babyface. So fluidly based on who he's facing and what the situation is, and his character was always accounted for that and has always been able to do it. But then if we're judging him for his entire career, you got Straight Edge Society Punk. He was like an excellent heel character, and the way that aspect of his character and the way that he had transitioned it from early on in his career being like this baby face thing of saying like, I'm just straight edge and the only thing that fuels me is the only drug I need is being inside a wrestling ring. He's able to then transition it to when you're facing a guy like Jeff Hardy and say, I'm straight edge and that means that I'm better than you. And the way that you poison your body means that I'm like virtuous and people should be following me instead. And then, he goes into his best in the world phase after that ill-fated spell with the Nexus. And then, and the best in the world thing, it starts off as a babyface thing. It's like people know how good he is and how good he talks and how good he is in the ring. And so they want to see that change. And then he transitions it to being the heel character under Paul Heyman of being, I'm the best in the world. And now I'm going to start, acting like it and start picking on your favorites, start calling out The Rock and start calling out John Cena and all this stuff. So I think that he has evolved as a character throughout his entire career, and while still always maintaining an element of truth to himself, and nothing has ever deviated too far from who he is as a person, which I think is arguably as admirable, if not more admirable, than a guy like The Undertaker, who made a gimmick which probably never ever should have worked and made it work really well because he was just so good at it and evolved with it and changed with it. But he's a fucking zombie. He's a brought to life zombie. He's not real, whereas CM Punk is real but has changed his character in accordance with different aspects of his reality.
Fair enough. I'm going to bump him up an extra point. You guys are making good arguments for that. So
I'll do that as well. I'll bump him up to a 9 on my end.
So he's again doing pretty well. I'm sure a lot of people would have assumed that this was going to be the crap on CM Punk podcast, which isn't. We're not coming out here with like an agenda. But
if you think that this is the crap on CM Punk podcast, you have never listened to me speak. And I don't know what to say.
Well, the next set of categories are the appearance side of it, physique and entrance. Pretty self-explanatory overall, but sometimes people forget that like entrance includes even the pyro. It's the full package of whether or not you like the music or if that works with their character. What do they do when they're going into the ring? Are they just the type of person that walks to the ring and that's it? Or do they do something fun with the crowd? Or, does it make you just go like as immediately you hear the glass breaks for Steve Austin and that's a huge pop already, or is it something where you're like, who the hell's coming out? It's this person. Oh, okay, well I'll wait a minute and then I'll look at my screen. And Physique is just, you know, their body. You know, it's part of the process. You know, you gotta look the part. So Punk has never had the most muscular or most intimidating physique or anything. And for Triple H to be able to cut a promo and call him skinny fat and all, I gave him a 7, but I gave him an 8 for the entrance. I'm potentially going to move that up to a 9. I'm not going to give him a 10. I know that, but I'm debating about the 8 and a 9 for that because the song Cult of Personality is great. It's clobbering time thing's fun. He does play up to the crowd when he's doing that stuff, but I'm not quite sure I want to give him a 9 for that yet. And Physique is just, you know, I mean, pretty self-explanatory on that end.
So I'll go next. I actually gave him 2 7s. I gave him a 7 for Physique because he's, you know, got a great physique for his shape, but he's not John Cena. He's not, you know, Ultimate Warrior, but he looks really good for his frame. I also appreciate that he was never afraid to change his look. He was never afraid to like grow his hair out or, you know, shave it all off, depending on the type of character he wanted to present. You know, I think he even said he had started slicking his hair back after his hair grew in because he wanted to be presented like a douchebag bad guy lawyer, which is funnier in hindsight than it was when he said it. I'm a big fan of Look. I only gave him a 7 for entrance because I love the entrance, but it's still rather standard, minus the occasional stage dive.
Well, sometimes that's a problem, though.
You know, I think Cult of Personality is a great song, but at the end of the day, it's still just CM Punk. And after he does the It's Clobbering Time, there isn't much for the entrance, but you can't deny just hearing the opening notes of that song, and people are, you know, on their feet. So he does still have a great entrance.
I'm giving him a 7 for Physique because I originally gave him a 6 because I don't think Punk's ever had like a particularly incredible physique. He's got just like a pretty normal body type, obviously more muscular than most people, but still nothing in comparison to a lot of the people he was working with, especially in WWE. But then I remembered that, and excuse me for being crass for a second, I'm pretty sure he's got it on with pretty much half the women's locker room in WWE.
He notoriously slept around quite a bit. Yeah, he checked a lot of boxes.
Yeah. So they're clearly maybe I'm not the right audience to be asking about like whether he has a good physique or not, because clearly, I mean, again, it's part of the charisma as well, and it's part of the charm, and he clearly has a lot of confidence in himself and his capabilities, and obviously he's settled down now, but yeah, there was a time where pretty much everyone was getting a piece of CM Punk, so he clearly has some sort of a swagger about him in that regard. I am known for the entrance. I think it's the Cult Personality is such a great song for him, and it really fits his, you know, that cult leader mentality that he has, and that charisma that he presents, and like the way that he's timed it all out and everything, the drop to the knees, the checking the watch, the clobbering time, the like posing for the crowd on top of the corner, like the way that he just holds them all in the palm of his hand. But and then you just have to remember the 2 biggest entrances in his career to Money in Bank 2011, and that was still under This Fire Burns, actually, which again is another great song. And but yeah, just coming out to that, and then the crowd reaction he got there, and then the first dance of him coming on that second episode of Rampage and jumping into the crowd and all of that celebration. And yeah, I just think that he's a master of holding the crowd in his hand, and in many ways that's the best part of an entrance, is when the crowd is super engaged with anything you're doing. So even though it's not like particularly spectacular, he's never needed like big pyro or anything along those lines. But yeah, as soon as he comes out, the crowd is paying attention from that moment on.
I don't remember another instance that we've been talking about the physique that we've brought up, the amount of people that somebody's slept with backstage, but that might end up being something we have to factor into the future and be like, oh, yeah, it's good enough for that.
Well, I just want to give it. I wanted to Punk because Punk doesn't. Like, again, it's just on my detective. Like Punk doesn't strike me as a particularly straight up attractive guy. He's fine. But it's just like there's that. It's like that. It hasn't got that natural like.
He's not the conventionally hunkish type or something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there are a lot of people that like that more, I guess, alternative thing. But I think it is just based that he has a ton of confidence in himself and can basically say, "Yeah, I'm like I don't need to like absolutely get shredded and anything like that. Like I know that I'm like hot in his own way, and it clearly worked for him." So, as I say, we only hear about the wrestling side of things. I'm sure he got plenty more outside of the people that he was actually working with as well at that time. So yeah. But it's just interesting to think because I don't think we've really talked about too many people that have had that kind of batting average, should we say?
There's definitely something to be said for self-confidence.
Outside of Ric Flair, obviously.
I bet. Yeah. And Punk is not lacking in self-confidence. And speaking to just people I know, yeah, Bill Brooks does, attract quite a few swoons as soon as he's in front of a camera. So definitely worth.
It's like Jeff. Like Jeff Hardy has that kind of appeal to him as well.
Yeah.
There are just certain guys that have that. And like, as I say, Jeff Hardy's never had like an absolutely incredible physique to him. But, I think it's just that maybe it's the hair. Maybe it's the hair as well. The hair.
Well, see, but Punk goes against that because Punk can shave his hair and people are still right there. So it really does.
I'm pretty sure not many people were interested in him when he had the mutton chops. But other than that,
well, people like Wolverine.
That's very much the physique thing. I think.
Well, Wolverine's got that gruffness to him. Yeah, people like a bad boy.
I love CM Punk then.
To people like a bad boy to an extent, but Jean Grey goes home to Scott at the end of the day.
Boy Scout, yeah.
They wanna bang the bad boy, but they wanna go home to the nice one. Yeah.
Even Lois Lane spent a few nights at Wayne Manor, but
for people that are like, you're getting into this, man, you're gonna have some interesting reactions to that Marvel versus DC Survivor Series thing. Trust me. But here's the star of the Superstar Scores edition for this one. The behavior side of it. Backstage professionalism, or lack thereof for certain people, and public relations. So the backstage professionalism is focusing on the locker room and their ability to work within the company as a coworker of the other guys and the other girls that are there, and the problems that can come up with politicking or putting people over if you're the type of person who never has a problem losing a match or is helping people out in the ring. There's a thing that I just came across earlier today about Zelina Vega saying that like Bray Wyatt had gone out of his way to really like hype her up during her tryout match, and that ended up being one of the main reasons that she ended up getting the job originally from WWE, was him specifically being like let's go Thea, like yeah, let's get a chant going and all. That's a real positive for the backstage professionalism. The people that do things like it's not working for me, brother, that's more of the negatives. And then on the public relations side, that is when you take it outside of the locker room and you factor in things like charity work, talk shows that help promote the company in a positive way. Or on the negative side, people that get arrested a whole bunch or have substance abuse problems or have been fired for saying racist things, or, there's been all sorts of crazy stuff in the world of pro wrestling. So we've judged some of these people very, very high, like a Cody Rhodes type doing really well on like the public relations side of it. We've had people very, very low, like the Alberto Del Rios, who have lots of issues that are constantly getting in the way of them scoring higher. And this is where we got to start getting into some of the negatives, because obviously the reason we're talking about this is because he was just fired from getting into a fight backstage where the head of the company said he feared for his life. Whether that's hyperbole or not, we don't know, but it's something you got to think about, because how often does that happen? Nails went after Vince. I don't know, too many instances of somebody attacking the owner of the company in one way or another.
You glossed over the obvious and went for Nails. You skipped over Brett punching Vince in 97.
Brett is one of the ones, but Brett, it seems from the stories that he was like, yeah, go ahead and punch me. I'm okay with you doing that. Rather than like, whoa, what the hell is this guy doing? We still don't know what's true and what's not about this thing. So we do have to keep that in mind, that one source reports that monitors fell on Tony Khan. Another one says that that's completely ridiculous and it didn't happen. And then another source says it's kind of somewhere in the middle of that. And one way or another, he's gone from the company and other people aren't. And there have been 2 instances in the past year of a fight backstage. And that is after he had the situation with the lawsuit in WWE, and his arguably top point in his career was the controversy over, I am going to complain about the people that I'm working with and I want to leave. Controversy is CM Punk. That might as well be what the C stands for. And at his highest, it probably would have been either right before the pipe bomb, before everybody knew the way that things were going on, or maybe we would have given him higher scores when he came back to AEW and he was very much like, man, I can't wait to work here. This place seems great. I want to be a mentor to a guy like a Darby Allin.
I want to work with Jungle Boy and the Young Bucks.
If you've got a problem with Jungle Boy, you're the problem. Something he had said. Yeah, praising the Young Bucks. And then, you fast forward a couple months and you got Hangman Page being like, I have to save the company from you. And then you've got, Nick Hausman around the WrestleMania tour had asked Seth Rollins, oh, you're interested in CM Punk coming back? And he was like, no, Phil, stay away, you cancer and all. Look, he's not getting 10s, is what I'm going to say here. We could be swayed one way or another, of course. I currently have him at a 3 for backstage and a 5 for public relations.
I also have him at a 3 and a 5.
Yeah, I'll go 3 or 5 as well.
Look at that. That's the first one we have exactly the same scores on all around.
Well, because, look, regardless of the he said, she said, the man, Tony Khan, went on television and said he feared for his life. There was a whole fight backstage last year where someone had their arm bitten.
Somebody got bit and the dog wasn't involved. Let's put it that way.
There was Good Boy Larry and then there was Ace the Biter. Yeah, Punk, I give him a 3 for backstage. And it sucks too because there are clearly a lot of people that like him. It's just like there seems to be this real confrontational element to things. And I gave him a 3 because he's let go from the company solely because of his backstage behavior. 5 for public relations because while CM Punk is a bit of a prick, he is also the first to stand up for trans rights and LGBT, just the entire community. And he'll wear a shirt in Texas that says, get your own, and then you can tell it what to do. with a uterus on it because he's, fighting against the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Like, he's clearly there's a good person in there. It's just a good person that doesn't mesh well with other people. Like,
it's a very good example of how you can agree with somebody in a lot of ways, and then there's some issue that just makes you on the opposite side. Because there's even like the things that he's talked about in pro wrestling are like, you can kind of agree with some of that. Like when he cut that pipe bomb and he was talking about like all these issues in WWE, and people were like, hell yeah, man, these things suck. And then when you go back nowadays and you watch like a Triple H promo where he's like, oh, you aren't really interested in changing the business. You only want CM Punk on top. And if it's not you that it changes for, you don't want that change and you'll be a martyr otherwise. Then you're like, damn, Triple H is kind of right about that. And then, like,
yeah, I think ultimately, like, at least for me, that makes the stuff all the more fun. Right? That, like, there is truth to all of it, and it makes those promos more fun to go back and watch. But I definitely get the idea of, there, I think you've said it a couple times. If everybody you meet is an asshole, maybe it's time to look in the mirror, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody that you meet is an asshole, then you have to consider yourself the asshole for sure. And there are a lot of people that are pro CM Punk in the world of pro wrestling that are like, the boys in the back and all. And not just, the people who he punched a clock on when we were talking about the previous, the physique side of it. But like, there are a lot of people that really fucking hate this guy. And not a matter of just, well, we don't quite get along, but we can settle aside our differences. Like, they do not like him. And again, we're not backstage, so we don't know. But when you see reports that say, is WWE interested in CM Punk? And then a lot of the narrative tends to be, well, we asked and we were immediately met with, lots of people do not want him to come here. That speaks volumes. You don't hear people talking about that for, I don't know, say, even Brock, somebody who you would think would have some kind of controversy over him. And most people are like, yeah, Brock's not a people person, but we get along.
Yeah, maybe like that part-time schedule thing where you just show up, do your thing, and disappear. Kind of works for some people.
I decided on the back of like your conversations, I've actually upgraded his Backstage to a 4 since then, because you do have to accept the fact that there are a load of people behind the scenes that consider Punk a locker room leader, let alone just a guy that's cool to be around. I think there's a lot of people in WWE as well that thought that of him as well, because he was standing up for people, like standing up against the status quo of WWE, which is terrible if you are like running things behind the scenes, but it probably is very good motivation for people that are lower down the card, that a guy like him sees something in and wants to get behind that guy. So in some ways that disruption is good, because without that kind of disruption, there are certain people that we as fans look at and think, oh, I really hope that guy eventually gets a shot at something, and they never do, because they're not going to be ones to stand up for themselves. They're not one of those people that rocks the boat, whereas Punk will gladly rock the boat. And as Triple H pointed out, a lot of the time he's rocking the boat for himself, but he's also one to rock the boat for other people as well. And his time in AEW is very tumultuous, to say the least, in the regards of the people that liked him seem to really like him and really respect him, and like were like go to bat for him. The ones that didn't like him thought that he was killing the company from within. So it's like it's so many different. It's like he's on two ends of the spectrum all the time. There's very little middle ground with him. The only people that have probably a middle perspective of Punk are people that don't actually associate with him that much in the company. They're like, passed him in the hallway occasionally, and just like other than that, never actually spoke to him that much. And then they probably know ones to be like, I don't really have much to say about him. And there are other ones say like, oh, I love Phil. He really gets this my perspective on wrestling, and he's a cool guy, and he's giving me a lot of advice. And the other ones say like, I hate him. I want him out of this company. Like all that other stuff. I mean, the whole stuff with Colt Cabana is a big thing. I don't know whether that really fits under Backstage or PR, but it's a mix of both, because it's like it obviously affects his relationship with people behind the scenes, because Colt is someone who is very, very well liked behind the scenes, and if he's got an issue with him, then people inevitably have an issue with Punk as well, especially in how acrimonious the circumstances there, the breakdown of their relationship was. You have like the Pipe Bomb podcast that he dropped, which pretty much severed his ties with WWE for a little while at the very least, and brought up a load of stuff which is like, in parts was bad on the company for what they did, but also in retrospect it's painted Punk in a bit of a bad light as well. All the stuff that he would go out and willingly say on like media, like press, like junkets and stuff like that for AEW, where the famous Brawl Out thing, where he just basically buried Colt Cabana and buried Hangman Page and MJF and the whole elite for stooging him out apparently, and that all leading to the incident, and then all the way up to what happened at Wembley Stadium like a couple of weeks ago. I think he's someone whose heart I think is often in the right place, and I think that he has a vision of wrestling that I personally very much like, and I'm sad that it's gone, because I think his approach to it has a lot of upside to it, and it's a different form of it. It was one of the things that not only his just presence on Collision was important, it was more just a case of the way that he viewed Collision was a good way of distinguishing it from Dynamite without it being like completely off the rails. So I'm going to miss that insight and perspective, because clearly he has a strong mind for the business, but he clearly isn't a fan of compromise.
Yeah, that's a big factor in there, because there are people that don't like somebody like a Bryan Danielson. He and The Miz, that's a good example right there. Bryan Danielson and The Miz do not like each other. But the two of them, if they are ever asked about each other, it's always like, yeah, we don't get along. In fact, we might even hate each other, but we've done business together with each other time and time again. We bring out the best in each other, and I respect the other guy. And they don't get into like shouting matches where you threaten to, choke the other person out, or you actually go ahead and do it. I think if Punk, of course I can't psychoanalyze the person, too much or whatever, but I get the impression that if Punk could sort out whatever anger issues that get in the way that blind him from a compromise, he would have far less enemies, and people would just look at him as a passionate guy who maybe they aren't going to get a beer with on a regular basis, but that they can work with him really well, and they can find a way to find the same path. And then you got an issue like the Jungle Boy thing, and we've talked before about how like all three of us think that the Jungle Boy thing is at least in part Jungle Boy's problem too. But instead of being a locker room leader and approaching that situation in a better way that's conducive to like finding a means for Jungle Boy to agree and to not, do anything stupid or whatever, it ends up being, I'm going to fight you. That's not great. Now, the public relations side of it, the Fives to me are on par with some of the other people that I'm going to bump up the Backstage to 4, because the way you're talking about, like, there are people that are very much on his side. So,
I have also bumped up the Backstage to 4.
He's polarizing, but he does have a lot more negatives overall than positives. So that's why I'm going lower than the middle of the road thing. But the Fives on the public relations, he's not somebody who has gotten arrested for domestic abuse or something. So I can't go like, he's a 1 or something, but he creates controversy that reflects poorly on the company. The All Out stuff from last year made AEW look so bad, and it's made Tony Khan look bad ever since then. If that interview didn't happen, and the whole controversy over Punk was his injuries and the Page said something that upset him and he was having a backstage thing or whatever, we wouldn't really know any more of that. But if that press conference just doesn't happen and the backstage fight afterward or whatever, AEW does not spend an entire year plus trying to justify that they can keep a tighter ship. So that really hurt the company's perspective from that end. And it's only gotten worse with this one more recently, because now people are, how many people are on podcasts saying Tony Khan's got no spine, or, he being Tony Khan, it's just playing around with his action figures and he just wants to be one of the boys. So he's never going to actually do anything that's going to make them upset. And then, of course, now he actually did fire Punk, but even that then gets criticism from people being like, oh, you're going to get rid of the guy who's got the best ratings, the best merchandise. So it's like, it's a no-win situation, and it's all revolving around Punk. I can't imagine giving him a 6 or like the higher scores. But we do have popularity and credibility as well to round this out. The crowd reaction side of it, you can't deny Punk is popular. And that is a huge factor for just like the cheers and the boos and all that, the ratings. We don't know exactly how the ratings are going to reflect having him not on Collision, but at least for this week, there's been a drop off. So if the drop off continues next week, then we know that a good portion of that's probably people don't want to tune in unless CM Punk is going to be in there. And the credibility side of it is more on the kayfabe judgment of whether they are a main eventer, a legend, or a jobber. Can they go out there and win a world title and you can buy into it and not think that it's a fluke? Or are they the type of person who only ever shows up on television because they're going to get their ass kicked and didn't even get an entrance? Judge the difference between a Roman Reigns in the company for WWE right now versus the way that they use Akira Tozawa. Or if we go into the AEW side of things, Serpentico is not getting the highest credibility score compared to, say, Kenny Omega. I went with an 8 for popularity and a 7 for credibility. That could be swayed one way or another.
So, after this conversation that we've had, I bumped him up on several categories throughout this entire discussion. But given everything that we've said, I had to bump his popularity up to a 10. This is it's weird because he's a 10 in the sense that he's a modern 10 in the wrestling is its own niche. And some people happen to know CM Punk outside of it as well. But I mean, when you just look at how insane this man breathes, and it becomes like, well, what did that breath mean? We're now going to analyze his breathing pattern, because what does he say? CM Punk is an insanely popular individual, and he's well liked by many. He's hated by many, but even that in its own way is like a 10 on the popularity scale, because he evokes such strong emotions on either end. So I've given him a 10 for popularity. For credibility, I've given him a 9. Because at the end of the day, it's funny because he said this 12 years ago as part of the original Pipe Bomb, where he said that he'd grabbed so many brass rings. People forget, before the Pipe Bomb, he was already like a 3-time world champion. He'd already worked Hunter, Shawn, Taker, the Hardy, Edge, or like he'd already been in that level. And then the absence of those stars and the Pipe Bomb catapulted him to the next level, to where he was like the number 2 credible guy on the full-time roster right behind John. And then you go to AEW, and he brought a level of credibility to that company where they sold out the United Center on a rumor. A very poorly kept rumor, but they sold out the United Center on a rumor that he was going to be there. They got to Wembley. I'm not saying it was entirely Punk, but I think a good chunk of it was. They advanced greatly because of him. I've got to give him a 9. You plop him in the Royal Rumble in January, and he instantly becomes a favorite to go to WrestleMania and beat Roman Reigns. I'm not saying it's what he's going to do, but I'm saying that, you plopped him back in AEW today. He's the real world champion. Impact should release half their roster to pay the money to get, you know what I mean? He is that guy. He is. And if you don't get it, it's largely because of a generational gap. But when you see what he draws, it's insane. I give him a 10 out of 9.
Yeah, I mean, I originally had him as 2 9s, but I think Rob's right. I think from a modern perspective, there is nobody that is I'd argue outside of John Cena, there isn't anybody that's a bigger name in professional wrestling today than CM Punk. And that stems from him being a big star in WWE, but never really presented as the biggest star, even when he was WWE champion for over 400 days. He was never ever considered to be the biggest star in the company because Cena was actively working at that point in time. You still had guys like The Undertaker and Triple H showing up. But then he leaves, and essentially every WWE show for the next 6 years or so is pretty much peppered with a large amount of CM Punk chants. He's almost more famous when he's no longer wrestling in a lot of wrestling fans' eyes than when he was wrestling. They hijacked the show because of him being around and them constantly having to quell it. It probably would have not happened if WWE was any good during the years that CM Punk was away from the company. But that's just the situation it was in. And then he comes back, and as Rob says, there's very few people that just on their name alone can sell out large stadiums and arenas. And again, Wembley wasn't sold out on Punk alone, but he's a big part of that. And yeah, I think he was a huge needle mover for AEW. I mean, we talked about just before we got on the air that on that Collision show where he was fired prior to it, when Tony Khan announced that he'd been fired on the start of the show, they dropped nearly 100,000 viewers. And it's you look at that and you feel the impact of, okay, that's a guy that actually, in a world of wrestling where there are very, very few needle movers nowadays, obviously Cena is back, but he's just very much very, very part-time at this point. But you're looking at Roman, Sasha before she got before she left the company. I think it's she got fired, she left the company. MJF, there are there's only a handful of people that really, when they come on, people tune in, and then when they're off the screen, they leave in their droves. And Punk was one of those guys. And yeah, so from a modern context, I think he's a very solid 10. Obviously, he's not a 10 that Austin was a 10, but it's a different time in wrestling. And for the current time in wrestling, he is a 10.
You convinced me to bump him up to a 9. I'm not quite going to 10.
No, that's fine. And then 9 for credibility, I say, multiple-time world champion in multiple different promotions, two-time AEW champion, multiple-time WWE champion, held it for the longest time of the modern era until Roman Reigns came along. Never main evented WrestleMania, but he did appear on did open the main card for the biggest wrestling show ever in terms of attendance. Yeah, I think that he always strikes me as a guy that's, when you put him on any promotion now moving forward, if he ever does return to wrestling and he's the biggest star there outside of maybe a couple of exceptions in WWE. But yeah, I think his credibility is one of the highest there is right now, again, from a modern perspective.
So now let's crunch those numbers. And remember, this is out of a 100 if you could possibly score 10 across the board and get a perfect score, which nobody is ever going to get. But my total comes out to, now with some adjustments, 75.
After some pretty heavy adjustments, I gave him an 80.
Yeah, same. It was like, I think we started on this and he was on like the low 70s for me. Well, low to mid 70s for me, and now he's up to 80. Because, yeah, despite all that backstage drama, Punk is kind of a one-of-a-kind wrestler.
And that mathematically makes our average 78.33, which puts him around the Bray Wyatt range, around the Goldberg. He's a little bit above Goldberg. Let's see. He's around Rowdy Roddy Piper, which I'm sure he would like. He's around higher than, but relatively close to his wife, AJ Lee, who was in that 70s range. Lower than a Mick Foley, lower than a Brock Lesnar by not too many points. They were in the 80, like 80 point something or other range, which again, a lot of people are going to be like, nitpicking a lot of like, how come he's got a 78 point whatever, but Piper's got a 76.0 or something, hey, look, these are all passing scores. We're not giving CM Punk a 33 or something.
And these can always be adjusted because, Shawn Michaels, at least for me, has a backstage score of a 6. That's all because he was able to come back and have a clearer head.
Right.
Granted, Punk's a little older, but you never know. I do want to commend the discussion here, because I don't know if there's ever been a moment where it was like you came into it thinking one thing and you kind of leave going, yeah, even with all this shit surrounding his name, he's too good to ignore. So credit to us for just the discussion, because I almost wasn't on this one. You guys were almost going to record it yesterday, and I'm glad I was, because it really changed a lot of scores and a lot of perspective.
I'm looking at some trends here. I'm noticing on almost every single one of these, Rob has the highest score out of everybody. Like by a point or something, like higher score for Ray, higher score for Ronda, higher score for Batista, Ric Flair, Austin. You got the highest for Wyatt, the highest for Kane, the highest for Big Show. I don't think that there's a single one of them that you're not the highest on. I'm still trying to find one. No, okay, so you don't have the highest for Ryback. Callum and I have a higher score than you for Ryback. So,
well, God, I think that just made me a better person. Both of you put together.
Right there, that's a score that we would adjust. We would get rid of some of those public relations and backstage things if we were to do Ryback right now. But in the future, we might do another one of those adjustment rounds.
Saraya,
yeah, because Paige has some things that she's gotten better at, and she's gotten worse at some other things probably compared to what we had done. But
God, I'm looking at Daniel Bryan, and I see some 9s that could probably be bumped up to a 10. I mean, I
got a lot of 9s for Bryan. It seems like that's his go-to.
I'm looking at Bryan. I'm seeing scores that could be bumped up. So I'm sure we'll go through it again Monday.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, our perception of even the middle of the road 5 score changes quite a bit too, because we hadn't done a whole lot of 5s originally, and then it becomes more like, if that is supposed to be average, then we need to give more average physiques to certain people and whatever. But I think a commendable 78.33 is a very good score, especially considering we're doing it immediately following a huge controversy where, look, a lot of people these days in particular are very much, if something's not a 10, it's a 0. You have to do the extremes all the time, and it's incredibly frustrating. If you didn't love that and think that it was the best that's ever happened, then clearly you hate it. I'm sure a lot of other people out there, if they were going to do their superstar scores, they would be giving him a 1 for Backstage and a 0 for public relations and going all, super crazy like that. Or they're very, very pro CM Punk and they would be like, there's never been anybody better with athleticism. There's never been somebody better on the mic. There's never been any better popularity score. I'm giving them a 12 out of 10, for everything. So I am curious to see what your scores are. If you have anything around our range, or if you're higher or lower for certain things, make the arguments, keep the discussion going. Let us know what you're thinking. And we have plenty of other people that we could do with the superstar scores, even just from the current setup. Like if we had like a really slow set of weeks, we would have potentially done superstar scores Lacey Evans, because she has gone from the company. I actually did my superstar scores for anybody that's wondering. She didn't score as high as Punk, but I already did one for Trish Stratus in case she's done. I adjusted my John Cena score for whenever we do that. So keep in mind, the pick your poison. If you want us to get around to doing those sooner rather than later, you can sponsor it. Or if you just really are a big fan of somebody and you want us to go back and talk about superstar scores, Razor Ramon we haven't done, or superstar scores Doug Williams. I don't know. Why would Doug Williams be the first one I would think of? Jesus. When was the last time Doug Williams was brought up in a conversation? Anyway, CM Punk superstar scores in the books. Make sure that you are following us all over the place at Smark Out Moment and staying tuned to the next things that are happening, which we've got a couple blank weeks coming up. So we could get around to doing more of these things. We were thinking about doing a what if as well in certain ways. So maybe we do the what if John Cena would have been fired in 2002 discussion. The wrestlers in the wrong era discussion was something we were thinking about doing. And we could also bump up the annual WWE and AEW roster tier lists for anybody that's really a big fan of that. Nothing says we have to do that in October. We can do that in September. So let us know what you'd rather have for the next episode, for the main event, at least for that, because we know that the hot tags are coming up for this week. We got a dark cast we're going to do at some point over the course of September. If you have any suggestions for that as well, let us know. And if you are following us on Smart Cut Moment and everything, then you should follow other things under the Mango Tree. You can find that all under amangotree.com. There is a link hub with all the different accounts, including the Fanboys Anonymous content that's over there. Go to fanboysanonymous.com. Check out the Facebook and Twitter, the Patreon, and the YouTube channel for that. If you are a John Cena fan and you want more content related to him, there are the most 2 recent fan tracks on Fanboys are John Cena and Jackie Chan movies, which Rob pointed out last night. And there might be another John Cena movie coming up pretty soon with Vacation Friends too. Maybe we'll end up doing that. Find that all on fanboysanonymous.com. Find all the different accounts on anthonymango.com for the Linktree stuff. Follow me at Tony Mango. Follow Robin Callum.
First of all, Ninja Turtles, after sleeping on it, was a really fun movie, and go check out that band tracks, and I'm gonna watch it again. Great movie. To that, follow me everywhere at Dude Felice. Check out my work on Fightful. I wrote an article about meat, which I'm just very proud of. And check out my work on WrestleZone and dudefelice.com for ever coming soon. Callum?
You can find me on Twitter at Weekmeister14. You can check out the power rankings every Saturday over on smartcammoment.com, where I rank the WWE superstars based on their performances in the previous week. So this one will be based on primarily on the exploits of Payback. So make sure you tune into that to see who's done particularly well. And then you can also find on Smart Cat Moment and at WWEFantasyLeague.com the Fantasy League, where our teams have been updated somewhat since Payback, following the prediction contest, which I was victorious in. I have since reclaimed Dominic Mysterio to my team after he was so rudely ripped away from me in the previous edition. So I have, so I've taken him back. Tony has added Jey Uso to his team. In the meantime, he's also traded out both Cora Jade for John Cena and traded Gable Steveson, which seems like the most most sensible thing that anyone has ever done. So even though he's apparently now pulled out of the world championships, so maybe he'll be back soon. But and traded him out for Jamie Uso, so he now has both Usos.
And John Cena, who I did not anticipate would end up being on my team at this point this year, but hey, it's going to be around for the next couple of weeks, so I'm hoping for switching him out around the time that he's going to leave.
And Rob has added Butch to his team, considering the fact that he potentially could do pretty well in this NXT Global Heritage Invitational.
I mean, I'm picking him to win. I'm hoping he just wins the cup. Honestly, like, a good look for Butch or Pete Dunne. Maybe we can get back to Pete Dunne.
He's at least a good option to challenge for it on the pay-per-view. I don't know if he'll win, but... Yeah, so make sure that you are following us, as I said, on all those different platforms. Make sure that you are leaving your comments. And stay tuned to whatever it is that you click on next. Maybe you're clicking on one of the older episodes. Stay tuned to that. I don't know. But, whatever it might be, thank you for joining us. And we will see you then. This has been another Smark Out moment. And we are being counted out.